Компанія Юстон Інфо – професійний організатор онлайн та офлайн конференцій, семінарів, конгресів, круглих столів та інших освітніх проєктів у галузі охорони здоров'я із застосуванням сучасних технологічних рішень. Ми пропонуємо освітні програми для початківців і професіоналів. Співпрацюємо з вітчизняними та іноземними фармацевтичними компаніями, залучаємо до співпраці доповідачів, науковців з України та світу. Створюємо відеоролики про діяльність і виробничі процеси компаній та медичних клінік. Участь у конференціях, семінарах, тренінгах від компанії Юстон Інфо – це чудова нагода встановити нові ділові контакти, обмінятися досвідом та залучити бізнес-партнерів. Трансляція заходів відбувається у вільному доступі на головній сторінці houston.info. На порталі встановлений незалежний лічильник для підрахунку кількості онлайн-переглядів. Ми відкриті для співпраці.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, good afternoon. Or good morning, depending on where you are, in Poland or in Ukraine or in Spain. Are we ready to start working and listening to a brilliant lecture?
Yeah.
Hi.
Great. Hello?
Hello, Ramila. How are you doing?
Well, we are fine, thank you.
Okay.
And it's a great pleasure for me to introduce today our distinguished speaker, Professor Dr. Joaquin Cayon de las Cuevas. We are indeed lucky to have a chance to listen to Professor Joaquin's lecture. And I should say that it's a great pleasure for me, not only as for a vice rector of Kyiv Medical University, but also as for a health lawyer and governor of the World Association for Medical Law for Ukraine. So let me now tell a few words about the unique expertise of our distinguished colleagues. Dr. Joaquin Cayon de las Cuevas, professor. He is the director of the research group on health law and bioethics at IDEVL, professor of health law at the University of Canterbury in Spain, and president of the executive board of the Ibero-American Health Law Network. And that's not all. What is important is that Dr. Joaquin has brought international expertise in lecturing, networking, and researching on health law issues, taking into account a multidisciplinary approach, which we all like and explore, and long teaching and research expertise, including the Council of Europe, with a wide list of publications and oral presentations as a guest lecturer and speaker at both European and American universities from more than 20 countries. Also, Dr. Joaquin has extensive practical experience in preparing legal drafts regarding healthcare issues for different countries mentioned by the UK House of Commons and Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. So we are really lucky now, and we are very thankful for this opportunity to the European Association of Health Law, with which our university has established cooperation. I'm very pleased to tell you that in addition to Polish campus of the Kyiv Medical University, your lecture is watched by Kyiv students and healthcare professionals and legal professionals. So we are eager to listen to you, and you are given the floor.
Thank you so much for your kind words for introducing me. It's a real pleasure to be with all of you regarding topics as patient rights in the era of artificial intelligence. So I will be very pleased to discuss with you these patient rights, just because I think artificial intelligence has changed the way that medicine is going to be provided all around the world. So I think in some ways some challenges and concerns emerge just because patient rights are going to be conceived in a different way than the traditional one. Well, this is a very huge topic, a very broad topic, patient rights in the era of artificial intelligence. So I wanted to just refer to three important topics, just because we could be speaking here for hours. So I selected some specific impacts on patient rights, and in this regard, I selected the way that artificial intelligence is impacting the right to healthcare. first. Second, how is working right to confidentiality in light of the European health data space? I would like to finish with some references to neuro rights, how neurotechnologies are impacting patient rights in some way. For sure, after my presentation, please feel free to make any kind of reflection, question, suggestion. All of them are much more than welcome. Well, the first idea I would like to share with you, as I was mentioning before, is that artificial intelligence is changing the way that the right to healthcare is considered traditionally, just because you know that the medical doctor-patient relationship is vertical, just because they are not in the same position. And this was traditionally, but I would say that digitalization is also reinforcing the verticality within the relationship between physicians and patients. And in this regard, I would like to share with you some ideas regarding the way that artificial intelligence is impacting the right to healthcare. Well, for sure, artificial intelligence is representing many different opportunities. We have to be aware of the opportunities that huge data sets processed by algorithms are allowing the healthcare sector. These opportunities first are in the healthcare field, the possibility of conducting predictive medicine, just because it will improve the prevention and diagnosis of diseases. And at the same time, second point, it will allow personalized medicine, just because thanks to artificial intelligence, we will be able to improve medical treatments. This means that each patient will have his or her single treatment. Also opportunities for the pharmaceutical sector, yes, because new drugs will be discovered thanks to artificial intelligence and the application of big data, just because we will be able to apply a particular drug all the inputs regarding and based on genetics of patients, diseases of patients, and lifestyle of patients. At the same time, there are many other opportunities, such as the possibility of avoiding adverse events from medicines. And also we will be able to optimize clinical trials that will be much more effective, just because we will reduce the number of clinical trials. The patients will be selected according to certain prerequisites, and also researchers will be able to monitor clinical trials in real time. And also advantages for the innovation sector, just because we, thanks to artificial intelligence, we will be able to create digital apps, and in short, we will be able to foster industry collaboration, just because pharma companies will be using health data space to work in cooperation with insurance companies, data management firms, or scientists. These all are benefits or opportunities that artificial intelligence is representing for the healthcare sector. But at the same time, we have to be aware of the risk. And in this regard, I would like to share with you 3 types of artificial intelligence applied to the healthcare sector. First, we have conventional AI, second, generative AI that emerged in November 2022. And right now, we have a third type of artificial intelligence that is really interesting for scientific research purposes, which is hypothesis-driven AI. Well, you know perfectly well which is the difference. Traditionally, we have conventional AI, which classifies the inputs we give to the system. So really, in medicine, the real change is the emergence of generative AI. That means that from existing data, the system is creating a unique and original content, both with text, both with imaging, both with audio, video, or code. And this artificial intelligence system emerged for the first time in November 2022. Well, the issue is that a new type of artificial intelligence has been created. All of us are used to deal with generative AI, but right now the evolution continues, and the new hot topic is hypothesis-driven AI. This is being created by bioclinics, and it's a new class of artificial intelligence invented for offering an innovative way to discover complex causes of cancer and to improve treatment strategies. This is also important just because the main difference is that conventional AI was giving us some outcomes from databases, and hypothesis-driven AI is giving us outcomes, but including scientific hypotheses into the algorithm. So on the one hand, it's more dangerous just because scientific hypothesis and scientific doctrine is more subjective, but at the same time, if we overcome the biases, it's very likely that the result is going to be much higher quality. So this is the point where law have to deal with. Well, these are the benefits of hypothesis-driven AI, focus on specific hypotheses or research questions, leverages knowledge to find previously missed connection, is much more interpretable, requires less data and computing power, and helps scientists to test and validate hypotheses by incorporating these. Well, these are the benefits of this type of AI. So in some way, you will be able to see that it includes broad areas of impacts, like experimental design, the integration of domain-specific knowledge, and so on. So the issue is, how should we handle these new realities? And in this regard, it say that the Artificial Intelligence Act at the European Union level in 2024 is the first regulation on AI, but this is false just because we have three precedents. First of all, we have the executive order of President Biden that was adopted in 2023. It just standardized evaluation and was promoting mechanisms for the protection of civil rights and freedoms. Afterwards, we have in 2024 the Data Protection and Digital Information Bill. And also it's very important just because it affects directly Ukraine. We have the Framework Convention on AI, Human Rights, Democracy and Rule of Law of 2024 at the Council of Europe level. This is our important framework convention that is not applicable, but it states and lays down minimum common standards regarding the introduction of artificial intelligence systems in general terms. Well, it is said that in terms of innovation, United States innovates, China copies, and Europe regulates. So there is a tension between innovation and regulation at some point. And in this regard, it's important to reflect that right now, the United States have a competitive advantage. Here you can see President Trump when was elected. This is his first day at office. And one of the norms who he was signing was the executive order of 2023. This means that right now, artificial intelligence has no regulation at the United States, just because President Trump was repealing executive order of President Biden. So this is a very important point from a geopolitical point of view, because it means that in terms of regulation, there is a huge gap right now in the United States that is impacting the way that artificial intelligence is being implemented at European level, just because we have lots of norms, but United States has no norms right now. So the issue, the hot topic, the tricky question right now here is how to balance between regulation in Europe and non-regulation in the United States, just because, most of artificial intelligences have been exported from the US to Europe. And I would like to share with you some concerns regarding this topic. Well, it's important that artificial intelligence was in the European agenda from the very beginning. If you review the speech from Ursula von der Leyen in 2019, he said very explicitly that in my 101st days in office, I will put forward legislation for a coordinated European approach on the human and ethical implications of artificial intelligence. So it wasn't in her first 100 days in office, just because it took a little bit more. It was because the artificial intelligence regulation was adopted in 5 years later. But at least right now we have a regulation at the European level regarding artificial intelligence. Here you have the norm, but at the same time, I would like to say a few words regarding the regulation on artificial intelligence. The first idea I would like to share with you is that there are a lot of intersections that have not been solved yet. Just because artificial intelligence in the healthcare sector has intersections with the medical devices regulation 2017, the European Health Space of 2025, the GDPR of 2016, the Data Governance Act of 2021, and the Directive for Product Liability of 2024. That's because we should keep in mind that artificial intelligence is a medical device. In this regard, the main problem right now we have is that the regulation is obsolete. Here you have news from the media that states that hard-fought provision of the AI Act could become obsolete, according to experts. That's why it's very important that we have to employ not hard law, but soft law. And in this regard, I do recommend, if you want to see how artificial intelligence can be implemented at the European level, the Code of Best Practices on Generative AI approved within the US and EU Trade and Technology Council. Well, let me provide an example. For example, artificial intelligence is creating a unique and original content, but there are no norms regarding intellectual property rights. So this is one of the gaps right now we are realizing, and this is what's provoking that the musical industry, for example, in the UK, is claiming for a regulation. Here you have the news from Paul McCartney that says that changing law over AI could rip off artists. So this is a very good example regarding the obsolescence of the AI regulation. Some slits. AI, according to its Article 2, doesn't apply to research and development systems. AI system is specifically developed for the sole purpose of scientific research and development projects. This means that, for example, we can use artificial intelligence as a private pilot at the hospital level, but not with commercial purposes. So in such a case, Artificial Intelligence Act is not applied. And also, it's not necessary just for domestic uses. AI system used by natural person in the course of a purely personal, non-professional activity is also out of the scope of application of the Artificial Intelligence Act. Well, here you have the entry into force. Right now is applicable since 1st August of 2024, and it will be fully applicable 2 years later, just 2 months, to August of 2026, with some exceptions that I cannot list right now. Well, this is the legal framework, the legal situation. I am reviewing the legal situation. First, we have no regulation at the US level. Second, we have Artificial Intelligence Act at the EU level. And this is a tricky situation that makes some ethical challenges emerge. First one is that right now, there is a concern regarding the data. And here you have news from the Wall Street Journal. Google's project Nightingale gathers personal health data on millions of Americans. In this regard, also you have a news from The Guardian. Google's secret cache of medical data includes names of and full details of millions, according to a whistleblower. Here you have the same news. So it's rather split the word, you know. Well, I would like to share with you that this situation provoked some concerns from the European Parliament, and there is a very important resolution adopted in 2017 regarding the fundamental rights implications of big data. By that time, the most used word, the most used expression was big data, but you know perfectly well that big data and artificial intelligence are two sides of the same coin. You need big data in order to make artificial intelligence possible. Without high quality data and massive data, it is not possible to have real outcomes. So let me share with you which are my concerns regarding this new situation. First of all is discrimination, and this being underlined by the European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights, the potential discrimination in using AI for making decisions. Well, for sure, artificial intelligence always have a bias. So according to the European Parliament and most of doctrine, there should be some ways of minimizing risk of discrimination. by three means. First of all, explaining how algorithms were built in order to rectify discriminatory applications. Second, it's compulsory to assess the impact of potential biases resulting from algorithms. And last but not least, it is necessary to assess quality of data collected. This is the first risk, discrimination, okay? Second one is lack of security. So we need security measures, safeguards. I'm not going to provide more details regarding lack of security just because it's a topic for IT people. But I would like to detail a third risk, which is lack of accuracy. It's very important to keep in mind that a predictive analysis based on AI sometimes can only offer a statistical probability. So it's very important to clearly distinguish between causality and causality that are not exactly the same. When some outcomes are based on causality, this is the so-called spurious correlations. Spurious correlations are outcomes that are based on causality. And I have here some funny examples. In this slide, you can see, and it's very funny, that the number of people who drowned by falling into a pool between 1999 and 2009 correlates exactly with the number of films that Nicolas Cage appeared in. So according to decision making on artificial intelligence, one may wonder that if Nicolas Cage is appearing on TV, hey kids, let's go back home just because there is a serious risk of being drawn by falling into a pool. There are many of these slides that demonstrate that this is just a spurious correlation. Here you have another one. The divorce rate in Maine, in the US, correlates exactly with the per capita consumption of margarine. So if some of you wants to get divorced, just eat margarine, just because in such a case the probabilities of being divorced are increasingly consequently. It's just a joke, but please, these are true data. From 2000 and 2009, there is a very funny correlation, okay? And well, we have many of these. The age of Miss America correlates with murders by steam, hot vapors, and hot objects. Well, what I want to transmit you, what I want to mean is that we have to clearly distinguish which is causality and which is causality. These three slides demonstrates that there are many, many different causalities based on data. The next risk I would like to underline is the lack of knowledge, just because individuals have a very poor knowledge and understanding about artificial intelligence and big data. I am going to provide another funny example, the so-called King Herod clause. This was an experiment conducted in London in 2014, sorry. And the issue was very, 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 very simple. Some people wanted to get connected to a Wi-Fi point, but you have to accept the Herod clause. And the Herod clause said that you will be allowed to use free Wi-Fi, but only if the recipients agree to deliver his or her child as a slave to the supplier company. And for sure, 66 people registered in just 2 minutes. This demonstrates that the consent should not be the main legal basis in order to process data. And last but not least, I would like to underline also the problem of the loss of control of AI system. In this regard, the European Parliament has recommended the inclusion of a kill switch buttons on all robots, just because in such a case they will be able to be deactivated when threatening the life of a human being. Here you have some examples. For example, Facebook artificial intelligence robots shut down after they start talking to each other in their own language. So it's important that we have to have some mechanisms in order to avoid the possibility of losing the control of AI systems. It's a very, well, I would say, a strange possibility right now, but this is a safeguard that should be taken into account. Let's see that even the engineers had a very particular relationship with the robot. Google engineer put on leave after saying that an AI chatbot has become sentient. Okay. Well, let's go to the regulation. And in this regard, I would like to remark that artificial intelligence system is based on a risk approach. So the AI define 4 levels of risk. The first level of risk is unacceptable risk. This means that, for example, using an AI for social scoring for detecting who could be more likely to not pay in taxes, for example, is unacceptable, and therefore it's forbidden. The second level is high risk. High risk means that before implementing artificial intelligence systems, the deployers have to make possible evaluation of fundamental rights impact. All the AI systems are high risk systems. Third, we have limited risk. In such a case, the only obligation is transparency. For example, a chatbot is a limited risk artificial intelligence system. And last but not least, we have minimal risk. That means that there is no obligation from that point. Well, it's important to note, I think that this slide is very important, just because many people say that the artificial intelligence regulation is affecting the healthcare sector, but it depends on the type of AA system. When we are talking AA systems that are medical devices, and when talking about medical devices, I am referring to those who are necessary for diagnosis and treatment. In such a case, the AI Act is not applicable, and we have just to apply the medical devices regulation. So when the AI systems are medical device for treatment or diagnosis purposes, the AI will not applicable, and only the MDR will be applicable. That means that before being implemented, a conformity assessment is needed. So the question is, when the Artificial Intelligence Act is applicable, it has a very small scope of application, just because it applies only for AI systems that are not considered as medical devices. And the main case is triage systems in emergency, just because it's suppose that triage is not a type of diagnosis. It has an autonomy regarding the MDR, and that's why triage systems in emergency healthcare is considered a non-medical device, and this is why it has to be subject to the artificial intelligence systems. Which is the real impact of being subject to the Artificial Intelligence Act? Well, in this case, a conformity assessment will not be required, but fundamental rights impact assessment will be required to be conducted by deployers, both in the public sector and the private one. Let me check some examples about how this works in concrete. For example, let's imagine a psychiatric chatbot based on generative AI. This is very typical right now in many different European countries. That's because you can have a chat with a chatbot, and it's very convenient, for example, for psychiatric mental disorder patients. This is an example that this is not under the umbrella of the MDR, just because this psychotic chatbot is just a conversation between the robot and the patient, and is not used with diagnosis and treatment purposes. So this means that this psychotic chatbot is under the umbrella of Artificial Intelligence Act, just because I insist this is not a medical device. We have a different example, AI system for predicting cancer patients' response to immunotherapy, that this is a medical device, just because it has diagnosis purpose. So that means that it's under the umbrella of the MDR, of the medical device regulation, not under the umbrella of the AI Act. Many different examples. For example, AI-assisted reading of mammograms. This is a medical device. That means that its scope is the MDR and not the AI regulation. Here you have the news. AI-supported mammogram reading detects 20% more cancers. Other example, this is not a medical device. That's because it's an AI system for emergency call classification. So please keep in mind that if the AI system is a medical device, and being a medical device implies to have diagnosis and treatment purposes, it falls under the scope of the MDR, the medical device regulation. And this is very difficult, just because you have to get a CE marking that needs a previous conformity assessment. When the AI system is not a medical device, is falling under the scope of the Artificial Intelligence Act. This is the case, for example, for triage, for classifying the calls. Also, for example, AI systems for patient triage in the emergency department, or sandboxes. Okay. Well, some takeaways from this first part. First, I would like to highlight there is a misregulation of AI Act regarding AI systems of healthcare. Everybody is aware that there is a new regulation on artificial intelligence in Europe, the 2024 regulation, but it's very important that most of AIs applied to the healthcare are not under the umbrella of AI Act, just because most of them are medical devices, and this means that they are under the umbrella of the MDR. Second conclusion, we need a new regulation updated, just because the current one is not taking into account the generative AI. Third, we are missing some intersection with other norms that I was mentioning before, as the GDPR, the European Health Data Space, and so on. Third, there are some gaps. For example, a right to explanation. How the patient the right to be explained that the medical decision have been made with meaningful information provided by the AI system? Well, this is not really clear, just because it's clear just in the AI regulation that the patient have the right to be explained. But since the AI regulation is not applicable to AI healthcare systems with treatment and diagnosis purposes, there's no real law regarding this topic in the healthcare field. I really think that the patient has such a right, but it's important to explicitly embed such a right in the current legal framework. And for sure, there are future challenges regarding this topic. Could AI system cheating us? Could it be possible to cheat us? Are we able to fall in love with AI systems? What I mean is that this is changing absolutely the way that we are providing healthcare right now. And I am missing some crucial points, as I was mentioning before. Just that as takeaways. The second part of my presentation is regarding the right to confidentiality in light of the European Health Data Space that is also affecting patient rights in a very huge way. Well, you know that there are two types of data use, primary use of electronic health data, which is providing healthcare, is the original way. And we have also secondary use of electronic health data. When I'm talking about data, for sure, I'm specifically referring to electronic data just because are the only one which are operable. So the most important idea to keep in mind right now is that, of course, we are collecting data just for providing healthcare. This is primary use, but these data are a very important source of the progress of biomedicine, just because all the purposes of this data would benefit the society as a whole. I can use patient data for research, for innovation, for policy making, for patient safety, for personalized medicine, as I was mentioning before, for official statistics or regulatory activities. Well, the way is, why secondary use of data that is impacting in a very important way to patient rights is necessary. And this is because data are no longer mere reminders of the clinical process. They have become the main source of knowledge of biomedicine. But for this purpose, we don't need data. We need big data, trillions of data, just because otherwise the result is not going to be useful. So data become big data when 5 E's are applicable. We need volume, not just a few amount of data, huge data sets, variety, not data from a very specific collective. We need data from many different sources. Velocity, this data has to be processed in a very fast way. Validity, this data has to be validated previously in order to make good outcomes. And value, this data should represent an added value regarding the disease of patients. This is the challenge, and for sure there will be many consequences, just because this will represent benefits for researchers and innovators, and this also would benefit patients and the healthcare system in savings thanks to access to more innovative medical products and better decision making. Well, There are many sources regarding data, wearable devices, smartphones, but for sure, and it's underlined, it's red colored, the main source of health data are the electronic clinical records of patients. So this brings to me to the same question: how should we handle this situation in order to process data? And there's been a very important legal shift in the GDPR that was based on the Helsinki model. The Helsinki model was reinforcing the primacy of privacy. So it was based on the autonomy of the data subject. That's why the traditional model only allowed the processing of data if one of these possibilities were met, or consent of the data subject. Okay, I am consenting that my data could be used for further purposes, or anonymization. In such a case, data are no longer personal data just because we don't know who is the owner of the data. But according to the GDPR model, there are three windows of opportunity that have emerged. First of all is pseudonymization. In this regard, it's important to clearly distinguish that pseudonymization, by contrast with anonymization, means that the separation between personal data and clinical data is reversible. Pseudonymization means that there is one big brother that codifies the data of patients, and in this regard, some specific and prospective research will be possible just because we will be able to follow up the evolution of patients according to the code. So this is a very important difference with anonymization. In anonymization, there is no longer traceability with data, just because once we separate personal data to clinical data, there's no possibility of matching them. But with pseudonymization, the name of patients is not known by researchers, but is known by a third party, which is absolutely independent of the clinical research team. And in this regard, it's much more convenient just because we will be able to use this data for further research. We have also broad consent and secondary use, but I don't have time enough for developing these issues. But the most important thing to keep in mind that pseudonymization is opening a new window opportunity in order to make big data possible. Well, here you have, in this regard, the difference between right to privacy and right to data protection, because many times scholars are using both rights in the same way, and they are radically different. Just because privacy only involves negative obligations and non-interference rights and emerged in the United States. So privacy is the sphere of my particular autonomy that cannot be interfered. But when talking data protection, the right to data protection, we have to be aware that it's something broader just because it involves both negative and positive obligation. The right to data protection that is embedded in different articles in the Treaty of Functioning of the European Union is a much more systematic model, not a case-by-case approach. And the most important thing, the right to data protection is considered an individual right that is limited by public interest reasons. So in the balance between my privacy, my right to confidentiality, and the possible benefit to society, we have to balance this situation just because in some specific cases, it is perfectly allowed to use your data. You know that according to the GDPR, the general rule is that health data processing is prohibited, but at the same time, we have some exceptions where consent is not applicable. Reasons of substantial public interest, medical diagnosis or treatment management of healthcare systems, public health. For example, during the pandemic, it was possible the sharing of data for public health reasons. And also when the use of your data has scientific research purpose in accordance to Article 89. So it's important to note that if we want to use data patients for biomedical research purposes, pseudonymization, as I was explaining before, is a new way that is very different than anonymization. This is what I was explaining previously. Consent is really difficult to collect just because we need lots of individuals in order to make big data possible. But anonymization is irreversible. So it's not complete just because there's always a possibility, a technical possibility of identification, and it's not valid for research purposes. And that's why pseudonymization is really the window opportunity that the GDPR is representing. I'm going to skip this just because we don't have many times to do it. And in this regard, I would like to share with you why the reuse of health-related data. Why this is going to becoming so difficult? First of all, because there are many different technical barriers. The standard of the electronic clinical record are not exactly the same, and there is a limited interoperability. This is a technical barrier. This is not for lawyers, but there are some legal barriers that I would like to share with you. First is legal barrier number one, the lack of common definition at the EU level, I would say at the Council of Europe level as well, about what's considered secondary use. And there's another important limitation, which is the way that the GDPR has been implemented and interpreted by member states, just because it's important to keep in mind that the GDPR has a double option for member states. Well, option number one is maintaining the GDPR conditions, or option number two is introduce further conditions, including limitations. And some member states, for example, Germany, is including many different limitations to the GDPR model. That means that the current legal framework is fragmented in some way. This is why the European space emerged, was proposed by the Commission based on four main pillars, making strengthen the data governance, ruling the data sharing, fostering data quality, and enforcing infrastructure and interoperability. And I would like to share with you how the European health space works, just because we have a data subject, this is the patient, and data users, this is the natural legal person that apply for using data, and the data holder, the hospital, the private association, which has the obligation to provide data for secondary use. Well, I am going to skip also this slide just because these are the secondary use, but I would like to share with you that European health space is not an autonomous legal basis. It could be considered that is a legal basis just because the European regulation said that where the consent of the natural person is required by law, health data access bodies shall rely on the obligations laid out in this chapter. But this is not correct, just because we have to understand the European health space as a highway. The applicant has to fulfill the requirements of Article 6 of the GDPR in order to request data. It could be the consent, or it could be a public interest, as I was mentioning before. And the data holder will provide data if there is a legal basis according to Article 9 of the GDPR. Well, there are some opt-out rules. It's important to note that the European health data space is a type of compromise between the Commission and the European Parliament, because at the very beginning, the Commission was trying to promote secondary use without the need of patient consent, but the European Parliament stated that the patient consent should be required in order to process data. And the type of compromise between the European Parliament and the Commission was that there should be an opt-out rule. This means that member states can allow patients to opt out on the use of their health data, except for the purposes of public interest, policymaking, statistics, or research purposes. So that means that by definitions, all of us as patients are donors of data unless we explicitly say no. So your data could be processed for these purposes unless you say that you don't want your data to be used for this. Well, there are some things that I don't have time for going further, but regarding this second part of my presentation, I would like to say that two important concluding remarks are: first, data are a common good of humankind. Data are the last opportunity we have in order to make medicine progress. Second, from a legal view, sharing data should not be dealt with under the perspective of right to privacy, but the right to data protection. That means that the public interest should be rather preferred when balancing, when it's at stake with private interest. What to do in the meantime? So I have a sentence that states that in dubio pro reuse, because for sure we're going to have many different gaps, many different types of interpretation. So I think that we should employ this sentence in order to foster a new pro-research approach. What is clear that we need a research-friendly environment if we want to make medicine progress. And I think that it is possible to make balancing patient rights and fostering innovation on the other hand. What's clear is data are no longer a private property of individuals. This is a very old answer in bioethics. The patient is not the owner of data. Patients are holder of data, which is something different. So this means that when we are talking about data, many different players have had a very important roles. Not only the patient, also the IT people who were helping to make IT systems work, also the physicians, just because they are translating the information provided by the patients in qualified data that have to be right in the clinical record, and the system as a global term. So I think that the relationship between data and patients should not be considered in terms of property, should be considered in terms of fundamental rights. So what I would like to insist is that the patient is not owner of his or her data. The patient is holder. That is something different of his or her data. The relationship between patients and data is not governed by the right of property, it's governed by the right of confidentiality. And the third part of my presentation is going to deal with something really new. And it's very related to the two previous parts, just because it's related and familiar to artificial intelligence, and it's related to data as well. So it's neuro right of patients. This is a new type of right that has been discussed in the doctrine. I would like to say a few inputs regarding this topic. Well, for sure, we could be talking about patient rights in the era of artificial intelligence for hours, but I would like to put the focus on the most unknown organ, which is the brain. Brain surgery causes strange effects on people's character. So when touching your brain, maybe this is going to wake up strange feelings. Maybe you are becoming more hungry. Maybe you are going to have more sexual appetite. It's very likely that a rare disease will emerge. Here you have an article from the British Medical Journal that also report that people who have been suffering a surgery with neurotechnology woke up and could understand all the languages. This is what is so-called the understanding foreign accent syndrome. It's very funny from my view. Here you have the news from an American guy who developed an Irish accent after getting prostate cancer with a different accent. And this was provoked by neurotechnologies. Here you have another example. This is not a joke. This is true. Car crash victim wakes up from coma speaking fluent Chinese. Just because, as I was mentioning before, the brain is absolutely unknown. It's the most unknown organ of our body. So the issue is that traditionally psychotic disorders lacked pharmacological treatments. So the pharmacological treatment, specific drugs for psychiatric disorder emerged in the 50s of the last century. So at the very beginning, all the therapies were used. For example, prefrontal lobotomy that was used for apathy, lack of spontaneity, and promiscuity. This was the side effects when using electroconvulsive therapy. So right now they are not indicated, but it's important to know that the founder of this type of treatments for dealing with psychotic disorder was Antonio Egas Moniz, that was awarded with the Nobel Prize in 1949. So right now, fortunately, we have drugs, but at the same time, a new way for dealing with this type of disorder is neurotechnology. And I'm sorry, just because the slide is not not correctly, there's an arrow that is not well posed. But regarding neurotechnology, we have to clearly distinguish between therapeutic neurotechnology that corrects a disease. This is right. But at the same time, right now, it is possible to use augmentative neurotechnology that enhances and provides a non-existing function. This is really important just because we can improve our capabilities thanks to neurotechnology. And this is emerging a new debate regarding how it's impacting patient rights. Okay, there are many different tools. We have stem cells, we have artificial intelligence, we have deep brain stimulation, we have bionics, we have robotics. First of all, we have neural implants. You can see in the picture. These are devices placed inside the body that interact with the neural tissue for recording activity or for sending a stimuli for overriding native patterns. So we can change the mind of a individual, of a guy, using neural implants. For example, you have the cochlear implants. It's one of the commercial developments here in technology that allows you to stream music for your compatible Apple or Android device directly to your compatible sound processor and hearing aid without the need for an intermediary device. You know that these cochlear implants are right now very popularized all around Europe and just is a neural implant. Also, we have deep brain stimulation that was developed by Benabit in the 80s of last century. In this regard, it's conducted by changing the function of a brain circuit through stimulation. We have also stem cell therapy. Also, we have brain-computer interface. So look at the video. So you are sending for your brain a signal to your bionic arm. It's incredible just because your brain is thinking and is sending a signal that is received by a machine. This is the neural processes, okay? Also, we have robotics with two important functions: eliminate medical errors inherent to human condition for reducing interoperator variability operating times. So the possibilities of the new technologies are amazing. So from a legal and ethical point of view, the question could be, what do people expect from neurotechnology? And it's quite funny just because most of them, 61%, are expecting cognitive improvements. So only 6% are expecting curing the disease. That means that right now, the new progress of medicine is considered as a way for improving your capabilities and not for curing your disease. So the question is it ethical to enhance our brains? And in this regard, there are two main lines, two main streams. Transhumanism is defending that technology developed to enhance the brain should be available to use without restrictions. So Julian Sabulescu, you know, is a very famous professor located in the UK, is underlining the right to enhancement in order to solve this conflict. But at the same time, we have another trend, which is bioconservationism, that is led by Francis Fukuyama from the US. In this regard, the main line of bioconservationism is that technology must not be used for modify human nature or enhance natural capabilities. So in this regard, the most important thing is not the right to enhancement, but the precautionary principle. I like also to mention John Harris that states that improving ourselves through technology is our fate. As soon as we realize it can be good, we will do it. Well, in this regard, there are many different initiatives regarding neurotechnologies that are affecting patient rights. We have the Human Brain Project at the EU level, the Brain Initiative in the US, the Brain Project in China, also projects in Japan, Australia, Canada, South Korea, Israel, and big private companies. So there's a new trend, so-called neurocapitalism, just because impacting your brain, it is possible to impact your consumer behavior. At the same time, these projects are trying to map neural activity, research innovative neurotechnologies. For example, AI could stimulate a digital brain. This means that we will have our own person and an avatar, just because it will be possible in the next years to reproduce our own brain. So it's in some way cloning activity, and to keep helping treating degenerative and neurological diseases as autism, schizophrenia, depression, traumatic brain injury, epilepsy, Parkinson paralysis, and so on. Well, here you have some all the projects, Neuralink from Elon Musk, Avatar 2045, Facebook, Google, blah, blah, blah. So here you have another example. This is the Deputy Secretary General of United Nations. It's a robot. So this is not science fiction. So the question we have from an ethical and legal point of view is, will computers store the minds? Will the mind be hacked? Who controls and who decides? What will be the consequences of elective consumer brain neuromeasures? Will it lead to more empathy, more improvement, more inequality, just because there will be some people smarter than others? So these are the ethical dilemmas. Augmentative neurotechnology could introduce a major factor of social inequality. We also could wonder if we should wait for universal access to implement neurotechnologies. That's because this is going to require economic sources. Technological elements could be manipulated to influence individual thinking and behavior. Technology would reduce the capacity for philosophical and moral innovation. And we also could wonder if this is the autonomy of the individual when medical action results in a change of the scene of themselves, just because many of these patients change in an irreversible way. Are these patients who change their mind in a very literal way responsible for law? Are they liable for damages, for example? But at the same time, we could also wonder a very important question. Isn't medicine a rebellion against biology? Should we allow all these new technologies that change patients' notion? Well, for sure, this represents opportunities. For example, brain computer. People with paralysis who cannot speak, thanks to brain computer, can decode speech at a rate of 62 words per minute. So you know that the natural pace of a conversation is about 160 words per minute. Not in my case, maybe I am faster. But thanks to this machine, people with paralysis will be able to speak. But at the same time, we have very important risks. For example, please note heat bands with rich brain waves to improve students' concentration. This is allowed to be used in China. So what should be the response of law? In this regard, we have some ethical concerns that are wondering how scientists are using some ways to hack the brain. And this is why some initial initiatives have emerged both from the hard and soft law level. We have in the US the Neural Rights Initiative led by University of Columbia by Professor Rafael Yuste. In Chile, we have a proposal for a constitutional provision and a Neural Rights Act in 2021, and we have a digital rights charter in Spain. Well, the Neural Rights Initiative from University of Columbia is promoting 5 new neural rights that should be included at the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. That's because this initiative defends that the current human rights are not enough to defend patients from the neurotechnologies. These rights are right to mental privacy, right to personal identity, right to free will in order to make autonomous decision-making possible, right to equal access to cognitive enhancement, and right to freedom from bias. This is the 5 neural rights that have been promoted in a very successful way, I would say, by the Neural Rights Initiative from University of Columbia and the US. There are also legal initiatives at the international level. The OECD has a very important recommendation on responsible innovation in neurotechnology adopted in 2019. There's also a Ibero-American Charter of Principles and Rights in Digital Environments on 2023. And I would like also to remark the important work that the Committee on Bioethics from the Council of Europe is making regarding this topic, just because we have in some way to balance the new developments from artificial intelligence and neurotechnology, and on the other hand, the patient rights. Well, I am finishing my lecture, but I would like to share with you which is right now the legal discussion. There are two possibilities regarding neural rights for patients. The thesis A is, okay, neural rights should be promoted as an autonomous category just because the current legal rights are not enough for defending patients. So we have to create new rights, and these new rights have to be embedded in the United Nations Declaration for Human Rights. The opposite thesis is that, okay, neural rights already exist. These are not new rights just because the pre-existing rights are enough for defending patients from the neurotechnologies. Well, my personal thesis is a middle ground. It's a middle ground between thesis A and thesis B, which the first idea is, okay, neural rights can be connected with pre-existing rights, because if we see which are neural rights, for example, right to mental privacy is very related to right to privacy in general terms. Right to personal identity could be assumed and is very familiar to right to identity. Right to free will, right to access, right to freedom are already collected in the Human Rights Declaration. But it's a middle ground just because I think that right now the problem is not about neural rights. It's about neural data, which is something different. And why I am saying that it's about neural data, just because when the GDPR was adopted in 2016, it was the norm was not collecting neural data, just because by that time neural data was not a hot topic. So neural data are sensitive data, but not health data. What we are thinking is not a health-ready data. It's just our thought. And the issue is that they are not included in the list of sensitive data that is adopted in Article 9 of the GDPR. What I mean is that, okay, there are some specific data that has to be especially protected. Health-related data, of course, data regarding discrimination, data regarding sexual orientation, data regarding ideology, data regarding political parties, trade unions, for sure. But what about neural data? What about brain data? They are not embedded in the GDPR. So I think that we should take advantage of this new movement regarding neural rights, but trying to become this movement not on neural rights just because we have legal instruments enough in order to defend patient rights, but putting the focus, putting the spotlight in neural data just because this is a very important gap right now at the European level. So what I defend is that it is necessary to improve the legal regime. First, giving neural data a status of a special category of personal data for patients. Second, providing legal certainty on the conditions of application and access to neurotechnologies. And in this regard, I would say that the Council of Europe seems to be a more appropriate platform, just because at the European level it's very difficult. You know, the Article 168 is very restricted, just because most of healthcare competences are left to member states. But fortunately, we have the Council of Europe, that, from my point of view, is a most appropriate platform. And this is my proposal. Why not guidelines for adapting existing human rights? I am not proposing to create new human rights. I am not proposing to give a specific nature to neural rights. But okay, why not some guidelines in order to link existing human rights with neural rights? And why not, I think that neurotechnologies challenging patient rights in some way. This is right now the hot topic at the European level, and I would like to propose an additional protocol of the Oviedo Convention. Well, you are right now located in Poland, and I love this philosopher, Zygmunt Bauman, a Polish philosopher. You know that the most famous work from Bauman is Liquid Times, living in an age of uncertainty. Bauman defends that traditional times were solid just because we don't perfectly know what to do. But right now we are living in liquid times that are by definition as uncertain. So Bauman gives us a way for balancing this new situation, and it could be perfectly summarized with this idea: surfing the wave just because we don't have legal instruments enough So this is why, from my point of view, South the Way should involve three proposals. First of all, trying to use neuroethics in some way. Ethics is important when there is a legal gap, for sure. Second, using soft law. When hard law is not ready, we have to use soft law recommendations, guidelines, in order to further on make it possible as hard law. And for sure, we also need a GDPR amendment. Well, what I wanted to share with you in this lecture, this 1 hour lecture, is that we have many different challenges regarding artificial intelligence. At the very beginning, I was trying to expose that artificial intelligence is not only about technology, it's about new biopolitics that is changing not only healthcare, but the world as a whole. And in this regard, I would like also to put the focus that right now, from a legal perspective, artificial intelligence systems applied to healthcare are just medical devices. Is that enough? Should we consider artificial intelligence just as a technology? No more. I am not very sure, just because I think that artificial intelligence is changing, is something else than technology. It's changing the way that we are interacting with patients. That's why I am also promoting not only the traditional Hippocratic oath, but a new technocratic oath. In the second part of my presentation, I tried to show you how the reuse of health-related data works at the European level. This is very important, just because thanks to the new regulation, there will be more flow of data at the European continent as a whole. And last but not least, I wanted to put you an example about how artificial intelligence could impact individuals, for example, with neurotechnologies. These three parts of my presentation want to promote reflection and wants to give one concluding remarks. The times of patients have changed, and in some way we have to rethink patient rights in order to make the protections of patient rights more important, in order to strengthen the protection of patients. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Joaquin Cayon, for your brilliant lecture. It was really brilliant, very deep, very, very thought-provoking. Of course, good lectures give rise to many questions. We've got many questions, but unfortunately, as far as I understand, we have little time. So could you please allow us to forward our questions to you so that we could continue the discussion?
Okay. So I guess that more questions than replies, but this was the objective of this session. Well, trying to promote critical thinking, and for sure I'm available for further developments.
And we very much want to continue our cooperation because we are very interested in many issues, starting from using of AI in healthcare and up to the idea of digital code, whether it should be implemented or not. So I believe we can find lots of common and continue working together. Thank you very much again for a very, very brilliant lecture from the bottom of our hearts.
Okay, it's my great pleasure, and please feel free to contact me whenever, just because I will be very glad to continue this cooperation with all of you. Let's keep in touch.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good luck to all of us. Thank you, and see you soon next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.